1977, race leader Gordon Johncock was in command with a 30-second lead over A.J. Foyt. Johncock looked unbeatable, but Foyt was determined to challenge for the win. Following a late race pit stop, Johncock's crankshaft broke 16 laps from the finish, and A.J. Foyt took the checkered flag to become the first-time winner in Indy history. Hello, I'm Bob Jenkins. A.J. Foyt debuted at Indy in 1958 with the well-known Dean Van Line's team. It wasn't long before Foyt was well recognized himself. With a fiery Texas personality and an unmatched talent for driving race cars, Foyt quickly became a major star. Winning an unprecedented 4 times at Indy and building successful records in auto racing worldwide, A.J. Foyt is applauded by drivers and fans alike as a legend at the Indy 500, a race for heroes. Texas native A.J. Foyt started racing as far back as he can remember. His father was a midget car owner who occasionally drove and didn't waste any time putting his son into a car.
My father had raced. I had my first car. I guess I was like 3 years old, he built me. And a guy made the comment last year, he said, they talk about all the rear engine cars. And here I'm standing at 3 years old beside my car, and he said, A.J., you started back in 1938 with rear engine cars.
Foyt started racing midgets and jalopies in 1953 at the age of 18, and by 1958 he was entered at Indy. His ride was with a proven operation, the Dean Van Line's team, but Foyt was happy just to be there.
At that time, every race driver, and I don't care if you run stock cars or what, unless you have never run anything else, because I started out in midgets and stock cars, you know, and then graduate to sprint cars. My goal was hoping someday that I was just able to qualify for the race, and I'd have to say that was my goal, hoping.
When the cars rolled out for the 50th race, A.J. Foyt was in the lineup. For a rookie, starting at Indy can be intimidating when everything goes well. This year, the start was disorganized. When the race finally began, there was trouble in turn 3. Ed Elysian and Dick Rathman tangled, and in the chain reaction that followed, Foyt's friend, Pat O'Connor, lost his life.
As I went through 3, I locked it up, and I made about, it seemed like 100 spins, but probably 3 or 4 spins. I come back running straight. I continued on, and thank God nobody hit me or nothing else. And I remember running around on the pace laps. And I saw my good friend there, and I felt like he had lost his life. And right then, I was ready to say, this isn't for A.J. Foyt. I'd rather go home and run the quarter miles and half miles, because this is really a man's game. And it was just too rough for me, I felt. And it really hurt me seeing somebody laying there.
Foyt did new after repairing damage to his car from the accident. Despite his early loss of time, Foyt managed to move up through the pack. Jimmy Bryan almost lapped the entire field as Foyt continued to charge, looking for a top 10 finish. He spun out on lap 148 to end a difficult day of racing.
Later on in the race, a lower radiator hose slipped off, and I spun going in 1 for the 2nd time that day. And I don't know how many feet, but both rear tires blew out right at the end. And I was just kind of glad it was over with that day, and really had mixed emotions if I really wanted to continue this game or not.
After a 2nd year with Dean Van Line's, Foyt joined chief mechanic George Bignotti and the Bose Seal Fast team. Bignotti was immediately impressed with his new driver.
I remember the first dirt race we won. It was at the Coin, and we're driving home, and I'm towing the trailer in the car, and he's sitting over there, and he's bang, bang. My arm was black and blue. He says, did I do all right? Did I look all right? I says, well, you won the race. You couldn't have done any better. But it did look like I was driving right. I said, he's bang. And he was so strong. I was black and blue there for a while.
With Foyt in the driver's seat, Bignotti and Bose Seal Fast arrived at Indy in 1961 as defending national champions. Competition for the pole was fierce, with several drivers eyeing the magic 150 miles per hour barrier. Eddie Sachs came closest, taking the pole at an average better than 147. A.J. Foyt put his car in the field with a solid run. Averaging just less than 146 miles per hour, Foyt would start from the inside of row 3. He was optimistic about chances on race day.
I knew in 1960, after I went with George Bignotti, that he had winning cars. We won a lot of midget races at J.C. Agajani's track at Ascot in California. I knew at that time that if everything was put together proper, we did have some winning cars.
Sachs, Don Branson, and Jim Hurtubise led the field as they rolled out for 500 miles of wheel-to-wheel racing. And at the start, it was Hurtubise taking the early lead with Sachs second. Jim Rathman, Ricky Parnelli-Jones, and A.J. Foyt completed the top 5. Several drivers took turns pacing the field, but slowly dropped out. Rathman developed magneto problems. Hurtubise made it back to the track, but fell out on lap 102. It became a two-man race between Foyt and Sachs. The leaders were evenly matched, trading positions on the track with neither establishing an advantage. With Foyt leading on lap 157, Sachs hit the pits in what would become a crucial series of stops. It was the scheduled break for Sachs. Later, Foyt pulled in for his planned final stop. And when he returned to the track, he immediately began gaining on Sachs. Lap 170, Foyt regained the lead, and Sachs was having trouble keeping up. But Foyt was in trouble. His speed advantage was the result of not taking on enough fuel to finish because the refueling mechanism had failed.
Foyt's very sharp. He knew something wasn't right. The car was running faster than normal, and he went to pit without a complete full fuel load. And, you know, when they put a big fuel load in those days, the car would slow down a whole full second or so. And he realized that he had a little extra speed, and I guess he surmised that he didn't have the full load of fuel, but it all worked out very well.
Not knowing that Foyt would have to stop, Sachs ran hard, putting excessive weight on his tires. 16 laps from the finish, Foyt made an emergency stop for fuel, giving the lead to Sachs. But Sachs was forced to stop for new tires 3 laps from the finish, and Foyt was back in control.
I knew it was going to be a hard race. I knew it would be a full race. I felt like I had the race won that day, and then when we had the problem in the pits with the fuel system, I said, I've got it won, but I've lost. I felt that's one time that a race was given to me, taken away from me, and given back to me.
A.J. Foyt took the checkered flag for his first win at Indianapolis. It was an emotional victory.
I would say I had tears running down my eyes. And like you say, I knew my mother and daddy was very happy. I was happy. And like I said, highlights was to qualify for the race, and then later on, a couple years later, be fortunate enough to win the race. It was just unbelievable.
For Foyt, it would be the first of many trips to Indy's fabled victory lane. Defending Indy champ A.J. Foyt had problems in 1962 when a wheel came off in the short chute on lap 71. And in 63, he finished third behind Parnelli-Jones and rookie Jim Clark. Clark posted the second-place finish in a British-built rear-engine Lotus. It was the beginning of the so-called British invasion and the rear-engine revolution. In 1964, many teams contemplated switching to engine cars. Foyt decided to give the old front-engine Roadster one more shot.
Well, I knew it was a coming thing. I felt like with Big Nighty and myself, we had a good operation. We had a good team. Everybody worked hard. And it's hard to come in with a complete new Revolution race car and just outrun everybody. They come in with new tires and et cetera and things like that. I felt like our chances were real good that year.
Jim Clark put Colin Chapman's rear-engine Lotus on the pole with new 1- and 4-lap records. Roger Ward put his rear-engine car on the front row as well. Parnelli-Jones was the fastest of the Roadsters, taking the inside of row 2. And Foyt was next best, qualifying for the middle of the second row. Nearly half the field of 33 were driving the new rear-engine machines, including the entire front row. But A.J. Foyt wasn't ready to give up the fight.
We went there, with what we went there with. We planned on racing. We knew that they'd probably lead early, but we felt like run them down if we run all day.
To nobody's surprise, Clark pulled ahead of the pack at the start, leading at the end of lap 1. But before the race was 2 laps old, Dave McDonald skidded into the northwest inside retaining wall. Eddie Sachs came up from behind and hit McDonald. Both cars exploded on impact. The race was red flagged. Sachs and McDonald died in the accident.
It's a very sad moment. There were some very great race drivers lost their lives. I'll never forget on the restart where it happened. And you kept running through the cement dust and things like that. It went through your mind that could have been you as well as anybody else.
On the restart, Clark resumed his early lead before giving way to Bobby Marshman. Marshman, huge gap over second place, then dropped out on lap 40. Clark was back in the lead with Parnelli Jones and Foyt battling for second. On lap 48, Clark's suspension collapsed, coming down the main straight and forcing him to pull into the grass in turn 1. Jones moved ahead of the field with some very tough competition from Foyt. Jones gave up the lead on lap 55. He pulled in for a routine stop. Coming out of the pits, Jones's fuel tank exploded. He escaped with only minor burns, but was through for the day. Foyt took advantage of Jones's bad luck, making a stop without losing his lead over 2-time winner Roger Ward. With Ward making 5 pit stops, Jay's 2 for fuel, Foyt easily led throughout the day. As the finish drew nearer, Foyt lapped the second-place Ward and cruised to the checkered flag for his second Indy victory. It was the last win for a front-engine car of any kind at Indianapolis.
Nobody really minding. A.J. Foyt, our national driving champion, defending, and now 2-time winner.
By 1966, the British-inspired rear-engine cars were now dominating Indy. Scotland native Jim Clark was the reigning Indy champ, and 2 more drivers from the United Kingdom joined the so-called British invasion. For rookie Jackie Stewart, a future Formula One world champion, A.J. Foyt made a huge impression.
There aren't any more apple pies and ice creams made like A.J. He is the epitome of the American race car driver. But he is also one of the greatest talents that's ever set his backside into the race seat of a car. He could drive anything.
Foyt had his problems with Indy cars in '66. He hit the wall in practice and was forced to qualify a backup. And on race day, in a rare start from the rear of the Foyt was eliminated in a massive opening lap accident. Though Foyt escaped with only a cut thumb, he considered calling it quits.
I would have retired in '66 if it wouldn't have been for a lot of news and press. You've won it. Why continue? And kept pushing me. Because after that, every time a car wiggled, because any time anybody had a crash, it blew up and caught fire. I would have to say coming back '66 and then come back with a banner year in '67 was probably, I pushed myself to drive a race car more then than I've ever have since. Because I'll be truthful with you, I was scared. And I'm not too proud to admit it.
A.J. Foyt returned for his 10th consecutive 500 in 1967. But Parnelli Jones dominated the headlines, driving a revolutionary and highly controversial turbine engine car.
I didn't have nothing really against it. I felt that it was a very unfair advantage. You know, it's like a jet airplane against a regular piston airplane. It had a lot less moving parts and things like that than what we had. I just could not see where it could be a very fair formula, you know, for it to match the reciprocating engine.
In qualifications, Foyt posted a solid 166-plus average. He qualified 2 positions in Jones in the turbine. Still, Foyt was realistic about the race.
We knew we couldn't beat the turbine. The only thing we were going to do is keep pressure on them all day long like we did. My car ran very well in 1967, and that was the only hope, hoping he'd break.
Following a one-day delay for rain, Parnelli Jones made his move shortly after the green. Running wide to avoid traffic, Jones took advantage of his superior four-wheel drive hand to take command early. He was virtually untouchable. As Jones led seemingly at will, Foyt never gave up the chase, taking the lead on Parnelli's pit stops. Jones almost got collected by a spinning Leroy Yarborough, while Foyt consistently kept the pressure on. Lap 196, Foyt was one lap ahead of third place and still trailing Jones by a large margin. But a broken bearing knocked Jones out within sight of the finish, putting Foyt only 4 laps away from win number 3 if he could just avoid any problems. Coming around the final turn for the checkered flag, Foyt's instinct told him to slow down.
I had a funny feeling. I don't know why. I was up with that group of cars, and I said, look, there's nobody close to me. I think I had a lap on the field. I just backed off. It's just like I knew something was going to happen. And because there was a group of cars behind, I come off before, I could not believe cars spinning every which way. I said, here, I've got to get to that start-finish line. I'll never forget I made a couple zigzags, and I lost them in the smoke, and that, you know, I knew I went between cars. I dropped it to second gear, and I said, whoever I hit, I'm going to hit them hard enough that I drive them past the finish line. I did have that in my mind.
A.J. Foyt's race savvy and intuition helped him his third Indy victory in 7 years. Number 4 would be more elusive. After winning 3 times at Indianapolis during the 60s, A.J. Foyt's quest for victory number 4 became frustrating. 1974, Foyt won the pole for the 3rd time and led much of the race early. Johnny Rutherford, charging up from his 25th starting position, challenged Foyt for the lead. The race became a duel between the two Texans. But with Foyt leading, a large puff of smoke came from his rear end. He was black flagged and was out of the race a few laps later. Foyt repeated as pole sitter in 75 to become Indy's second 4-time pole winner. For the race, Foyt led 53 laps, but trailed Bobby Unser and Johnny Rutherford going into the final 50 laps. Foyt was making a move to catch the leaders when race yellow locked him into 3rd place. And finally, a rainstorm put an end to the competition on lap 174. 1976 brought yet another Texas shootout between Foyt and Rutherford. With Foyt developing handling problems, Rutherford held the lead on lap 102 when rain for the 2nd year in a row interrupted the race. Foyt's crew repaired the problem during the delay, and many believed Foyt would take the lead on the restart. But the restart never happened. Rains ended the day as the cars warmed up in the pits. Rutherford was declared the winner. After 3 years of coming close, Foyt was frustrated.
There was nobody. Our cars at that time were like the Penske cars are today. All I had to do was stay out of trouble, win the races. Ran fuel twice in 75. Same thing, 76. All over the race, 1977, we ran out of fuel. I just felt like I couldn't win it for the 4th time.
1977, A.J. Foyt lined up inside of row 2 for the start. Al Unser pulled away from the outside of row 1 to take the lead when the green flag fell. But as the race progressed, several drivers, including Foyt, would pace the field. Lap 97, Gordon Johncock pulled into the lead and away from the competition. The field grew smaller as Johncock continued to dominate. For 83 straight laps, Johncock remained in the top spot. Only A.J. Foyt and Tom Sneva remained on the same lap.
I was picking up Gordy Johncock over a 2nd lap without turning up the boost. We could. And I said, well, I've drove for Big Knotty. He's pretty smart. He'll let me get within about maybe 8 to 10 seconds. Then he's going to send Gordy on his way. And when it went 10, 9, 8, 7, I knew they were in trouble.
Johncock pitted on lap 179, finally giving up the lead. But Foyt would have to make a stop as well. Back on the track with only 18 laps to go. Didn't have much time. But as Johncock came across the start-finish line to begin lap 185, he slowed dramatically, the result of a broken crankshaft, and coasted into the turn 1 grass. Johncock watched from the creek in turn 1 as A.J. Foyt held off Sneva to take the checkered flag and go down in history as Indy's first ever 4-time winner. His place firmly planted in the Indianapolis 500 record books, A.J. Foyt continued through the 1980s searching for win number 5. Though he found the going tough, Foyt relentlessly came back every year. And despite his limited success during the 80s, Foyt remained a respected presence to the next generation of potential legends.
Probably arguably the greatest race driver that ever lived. I mean, there's a lot of people that might not agree with that, but you know, definitely if you counted him on one hand, he'd have to be the first, second, or third finger to go up.
I consider it lucky and an honor. I've driven with A.J. In the sports cars, and you know, he's a great driver, and you know, the guy probably knows more about race cars than, or he's probably forgotten more than I'll ever know.
For the 1990s, A.J. Foyt continues his search for victory number 5.
Today that I lose the drive to want to win, I will quit. It might be tomorrow. It might be before Indianapolis. I'm not going to lie. I don't know. But when I do retire, I'll never sit back in another race car. Never. I just want to make sure I'm through.
A.J. Foyt debuted at Indy in 1958. Within 4 years, he became a winner. By 1977, he became the first 4-time winner. And along the way, he gained the respect and admiration of fellow drivers worldwide.
He's the king. He's the greatest. He's not, but he is. Only my dad was better at Indianapolis. That's what I say. But I'm prejudiced. But I mean, he's a fabulous, fabulous person. As a race driver, I mean, he's unbelievable what the man has accomplished. Unbelievable. If you think it's easy, go do it. How many guys have done it? Ain't too many walking around that can say they've accomplished in racing what he has. The guy's done it all. Daytona, 24 hours, Indianapolis, midgets, dirt cars, you name it, that man has excelled in it. It's amazing.
He could drive a sprint car, he could drive a sports car, he could drive an Indy car, he could drive a stock car. You give him it wheels and a steering wheel and A.J. Foyt would drive it. And he had great race sense. He was just a natural. And there are a few naturals that come along in the history of the sport, and he was one.
I've always told people if I was ever reborn, I don't know of anything I'd ever change. I've had my good days. I've had my bad days. I always feel like if your good days offset your bad days, in the long run, you're ahead of everything.
In a race few have won, and fewer still become recognized as legends, A.J. Foyt qualifies as one of the best ever at the Indy 500, a race for heroes.